Castle is a structure near Homestead, Florida, made of oolite, a limestone-like sedimentary rock. It was single-handedly constructed in 1923 by Latvian immigrant Edward Leach Skalnin, who built it over the course of about 28 years. For concealment, he worked almost exclusively at night, used tools that reportedly came from a dump, and when questioned how he accomplished carving and setting the stones, replied that he had rediscovered the secrets of the pyramids. He reportedly built the structure for his Sweet 16, believed to be a reference to his fiancée Agnes Skufst, who jilted him the day before the wedding. There is some controversy that Ed's Sweet 16 could be a coded or veiled reference to something else entirely, as she was said to not be 16 when she left him. Although there were rumors that school children had seen Ed somehow float the stones through the air like hydrogen balloons, ultimately how it was constructed remains a great mystery to this day. Ed took his secrets to the grave when he died of a kidney infection at the age of 64. Various tools and equipment were found upon searching the premises, but there was one notable item missing. An oblong black box set on top of an A-frame hoist was nowhere to be found and presumed stolen. The box is speculated by many to be a vital missing link in Coral Castle's construction. What you are about to hear is a demonstration of quantum meditation and remote viewing from clairvoyant Dr. Douglas James Cottrell in a series of consultations carried out over a period of about a year. Numerous questions were asked, the answers to which yielded a vital piece of information which, if accurate and investigated, could solve the riddle of Coral Castle's construction. After considering the pros and cons of releasing this information, I decided to just come out with it. This video is separated into individual segments, each introduced by myself to clarify the information that is given. What follows is the most detailed, in-depth profile ever of the mysteries of this structure, its architect, and how it was built. Any thoughts or ideas on how best to proceed from here, please leave a comment below.
Please locate Edward Leach Skalnin, who died December 7, 1951 in Miami, Florida, USA.
What is the question?
Please locate the structure called Coral Castle, north of Homestead, Florida, at the intersection of South Dixie Highway and Southwest 157th Avenue.
Yes, we have the place.
When Edward Leach Skalnin is asked about how he built Coral Castle, how does he respond?
It would appear that the entity had a device when laid over top of these large sections of material, that there would be a disruption of vibrational influence or gravity fold, and they would float. Direction.
Please examine Coral Castle. Is there anything hidden or buried on the property that belonged to Edward Leach Skalnin?
There are several things. One in particular, located at the bottom row of the coral, just inside the doorway, there is a little chamber in which the entity would have a box, and on top of the box would be a small crystal. It would look like a crystal that would go into a ring, but would be a little big for the same.
Please describe where this is located.
What are you referring to exactly?
This box with the small crystal.
As we have given, inside the wall, just inside the front entrance, there would be a panel, or what would appear to be a facade here. The entity has hidden this in plain view so that there would be an observation of it, but a non-use of the same. Here, by tapping on the stones, there can be seen. By tapping on the stones, there could be seen if there was a resonance here, or there would be a curiosity. Direction.
You have mentioned previously, when examining the construction of Coral Castle, that Edward Leach Skalnin placed a small device on the stone blocks to nullify gravity. What happened to this device? Does one still exist?
It has the ability to disrupt magnetism and electricity and gravity at the same time. It looked like a small child's toy that would have a spinning sensation within it, almost like a top. It spins and remains stationary, and whatever it is affixed to, within certain parameters, are themselves affected, or more exactly, they are relieved, and the disruption is nothing short of that. It would be the combination of magnetism and the disruption of electricity and that of the static electricity about the same, more of a disruption of the effect of gravity upon the same. It combines magnetism, it combines gravity, and some other elements, you'll see. But here it is more to disrupting rather than jacking up one end and then the other, so to speak, and having the middle part twist. Instead, the entity has brought those things to himself. They would simply disrupt the lines of gravity. See them in lines or beads from the sun, and see them in lines or waves from the earth. And the ability to be between the two could allow just about anything to float or to move through the air. Direction.
Where is it located, this device?
It is a small handheld device, again in the portal area, walking through into the structure itself. Appears to be on the floor line, level, or with the Father, with the form. What is the question, you'll say?
Does Edward Leach Skelnin have any message for the people of today?
We have the entity smiling, and he has pointed to a variety of objects on a long table. Everything is laid out, all the things, the information, the so-called secrets is already at hand. It just needs assembly. Direction.
Okay, note he mentioned the gravity disruptor can still be found on the Coral Castle property, near the entrance. Notice there are at least two entrances. I asked for more specifics on this later. A hidden panel on one of the blocks at ground level is said to be able to be opened from the inside to reveal a hollowed-out chamber or compartment Ed made that contains this device. Notice also that the device is described as a box, looking like a child's toy, and is placed on top of the stones. That fits the general shape, but not exactly the size and description of the oblong box shown at the top of the tripod in Ed's photos. The latter looks like the size of a car battery at least, hardly a child's toy. So we could be talking about something different here, or, more likely, a later version of the device that Ed was able to encapsulate into a smaller box. Think about it. Technology usually progresses from a prototype to a standard version to more advanced, often getting smaller in size over time as the technology gets more developed. Ed was an inventor. He was an innovator and always experimenting. Take the evolution of the cell phone, for example, shown here. The first mobile phones looked like gigantic walkie-talkies. Today's cell phones fit in your breast pocket and are capable of so much more. So it really isn't much of a stretch to think that if Ed developed such a device that could float stone or other heavy objects, that he could have continued to refine it, making it smaller, lighter, and more efficient. He says the box, when it is in operation, has a spinning sensation within it. Could a spinning motor of some sort be inside? In this next live reading, I ask more specifically where the device can be found, and about any other items belonging to Ed Leeds Skalnin that could still be found in the premises, as well as exploring other questions. In a previous communication, you had mentioned there are items still concealed on the property, one of which is a box with a small crystal affixed to the top, and that this box is inside a hollowed-out compartment in the wall, just inside the front entrance. Please locate this item once again, please.
I have this.
I have informed the administrators of Coral Castle about this object. They were receptive to the idea of looking for it, so the purpose of this question is to guide them directly to it. When one walks into the Coral Castle entrance, you said the object is within the wall on the bottom row of the coral at ground level. Is this correct?
One moment. Affirmative.
Would one be able to get to the object from the inside of Coral Castle or the outside?
From the inside.
Okay. Are there any markings on the piece of wall or coral that contains this object?
Non-distinctive marks, although there seems to be some swirls or curls in the markings on the stone.
You mentioned a panel on the wall. Presumably this panel could be removed. How would this be done? Is there a lever of some sort?
We are observing the entity to whom you have sent us, and he seems to be able to peel the panel back. You don't find any levers or levering devices here.
Hey, when someone walks into Coral Castle, will this be the main entrance? You said it was inside of the Coral Castle entrance. Would this be the front main entrance then?
We have a small archway. We have the entity pointing to the floor. We have a sandy color, although perhaps a darker color floor. And the entity is standing here pointing at the same direction.
So is it presumed that Edward Leeds Skalnin, this entity, wishes this item to be found at this time?
He is somewhat playing hide and seek with us, but to the answer, the entity seems to be quite humorous in pointing around here and there as we are observing him, you'll say. We assume the entity is cooperating, although he appeared to be hiding in a tree before we began the communication. To the question, affirmative.
Okay. How far inside the entrance would one have to walk, left or right, to get to this particular block of coral?
In the doorway, it is immediately to the right. This archway, it appears to be, immediately to the right. There is other items in the room that we are perceiving, but not clearly. Direction.
Okay. As for this object itself, this box with a crystal affixed, was this the item used to levitate the coral?
It was the item used to disrupt the gravity.
Okay. Is the object still functional? In other words, could it be made to work today like it did when Edward Leeds Skalnin used it?
It appears to need some power or some magnetic electrical stimulation. Then, with the combination of gravity, electricity, and magnetism, the equalization of the same causes a resonance or a disruption of gravity. This does not seem to need a lot of power, but the power seems to be self-generated from the magnetic and electrical inputs, you'll say. Direction.
Is there anything else hidden or buried on the property that belonged to Ted Edward Lee Skelman?
Appear to be several objects, some of those things that were hidden from his matrimonial connections or belongings to himself. There's a compass. We also have here some maps. The entity has some artifacts like watches, timepieces you might call them. To the question, small or mementos put here or there sort of slide you off the track, and also some coins here. These would be considered here put in certain places for safekeeping or here to distract people from looking further. This container you are looking for is nondescript. There is a green glow or hue to the same, almost invisible. The chamber is dark, the wall is thick. You might be able to detect it by sonar, detecting, but it appears to be deep in the wall, yet the entity is apparently able to peel the panel off the wall, as he is demonstrating here. And he is giggling, we might say, uncharacteristically. Direction.
Okay, so this panel could be in the wall, could be removed by hand?
By his hand, yes.
Okay. You mentioned a rapping on the wall or tapping on the wall, presumably like a private investigator would perhaps knock on the wall of a house to see if it's hollow. Is that something that might give it away?
That, or more specifically, penetrating radar or sonar.
Okay.
You are looking for a small cavern in what would be a cleverly hidden irregular surface, properly designed so they cannot be seen as a geometrical shape or cavity. However, it is detectable, or seems to be from our perspective. Direction.
Thank you. You mentioned some coins hidden on the property. Let's put it this way. Is there anything other than this object embedded in the wall, this box with a crystal, anything else hidden on the property that had to do with Edward Lee Skelman's construction of the castle?
You might find some paperwork or plans. You might find some tools, hand tools as we see it. And there seems to be
conventional hand tools?
These are odd shaped. They would be seen more like picks or spikes. They don't appear to be conventional.
Okay, where would they be located?
We are looking under the floor. We're looking at the edges. There seems to be a drop off towards one end in that area. They were put here on purpose. They
Is
are.
there anything, so they're underneath the floor, is there anything over this portion of the floor that would help locate it?
We have a small, looks like rug or covering here, nondescript, has some foliages around it. The floor we look at looks more barren than anything, but this seems to be a covering, a scatter rug perhaps.
Okay. For these things under the floor, would, for example, the kind of detector that some people use to look for gold or coins on a beach, would that help locate this?
Might not be strong enough as far as penetration, but those devices that would be used to find walls in archaeological digs would be. a little more heavy, but it would be somewhat laborious to do this, but it would show some shadows, yes to the question.
Okay.
The lighter devices would have some pinging or some, let us call it, shadow or signature direction.
Okay. Last question regarding Edward Lee Skelton and Coral Castle. There are old photographs showing Edward Lee Skelton pictured with pulleys. If he had the aid of being able to float the stones, why was there a need for pulleys?
You understand that there would be policemen of the same. There would be more than one, and indeed the device he used was very weak. But pulleys were used to move sideways. They were used to distract. And somewhat we have here a teepee-shaped bar or stand. This would be to help to make the fight correction, the fine, tight fittings, you'll say, somewhat pulled into place horizontally or moved slightly. It was not a magic wand in which the block would move. It would be a matter of being light, but still awkward to handle. Direction.
Some notes on the reading you just heard. The coins and tools or other implements mentioned earlier as being underneath the floor. A covering or rug is mentioned near a drop-off in the floor, so anyone searching could look for that. Ed had a living quarters that sort of looks like a castle structure, so I'm thinking these other items would most likely be in that area. The gravity disruptor or device Ed used to lift the blocks, of course, would be of most interest, and this was indicated to be embedded in a hidden small chamber inside one of the blocks near the entrance. The hidden panel in the wall is supposed to be able to be peeled back. Sounds to me like a sliding door of some sort. Also, is mentioned here that the box requires electrical input, probably from outside itself. The DTM is saying here that the box or electromagnetic device was used for easy vertical lift, and the pulley and tripod Ed used were to make the final adjustment sideways as the block was fitted into place. Since there are technically two entrances to Coral Castle, I ask in this next session which one is meant, along with several other questions about how Ed came to invent the device. I ask about the flywheel found elsewhere on the premises, and there is much additional and technical information on the device and how it works. It was also just previous to when this DTM was done that I contacted the Coral Castle staff about the DTM readings, let them know about the information, and sent them transcriptions of much of the DTM information in this video. Eventually the response was that the owners were not in agreement with searching for the device. The reasons did not seem to be skepticism, but concern for the property, and the reasons given for this make a lot of sense, especially if you put yourself in the shoes of those who own and care for the property. A great deal of interesting information is found here in this next section. Enjoy. Now please examine and bring into this communication the minds associated with the ownership and upkeep of this property.
What is the question?
Okay. I have asked this source a number of times recently about how Coral Castle was built, and the information was given that a small box with attached crystal was hidden in the wall near one of the entrances, and that ground-penetrating radar could be used to validate where in the wall the box is. Firstly, I am wondering if the box at this point in time is still in the hidden compartment in the wall, or have the Coral Castle caretakers removed it, or anyone else for that matter. So please inspect the wall near the entrances. Is the box still in the wall?
There appears to be a cavity. There appears to be a container. There appears to be something folded on top, like a decoration. I'm not quite sure. It looks like a ribbon, but it is not. Yes, there seems to be, from this perspective, the container, and those minds that you have referred us to have, let us say loosely, tapped, listened with a listening device, even a crude one. They don't seem to be that interested in finding what you are referring to, for this might affect their mystery, or they are a little concerned. What if they do find something, you'll say. They are not disinterested, but they are not actively interested in locating the same. Or at least it appears so. They don't seem to be too active at looking for this hollow space. But there seems to be a small box, as we have given before, and has some coiled material looking like a ribbon on top. We can't see it too clearly. It's dark in here. Direction.
Okay. You mentioned the hidden compartment in the wall is located near one of the entrances. There are two entrances, so to speak. There is one with a large revolving door or vertical stone slab, and another that is regarded as the front entrance, near which there is a plaque that reads, "You will be seeing unusual accomplishment." Near which entrance is the block of stone containing the box?
We're having difficulty distinguishing between the two, but here it would appear to be towards not the one with the plaque, but the other one. Direction.
Okay. I called the caretakers of Coral Castle, spoke with one of them. I let them know about the box and that it was this source, and gave them a portion of a transcription of the reading. But the property owners are concerned, as you noted, and they do not wish to have the wall radared, nor do they want to take the chance of any visitors to this place tapping on the walls. Briefly, have they, out of curiosity, or had any of their people look for the box? You seem to have answered this, but just a little more. Can you touch on it?
That's correct. They have taken a cursory look upon the same. They've had discussions. The real problem is, what if they do find something? Then what? They are afraid of the government closing them down or taking the device, or here, all sorts of scenarios have been discussed, and they would be legitimate in their discussions. But yes, to the question, there has been a natural curiosity, a tapping with something, looks like a hammer, mallet, stethoscope would appear, or something listening, crude device. As to the question, they have attempted, but not actively so. The real fear is, what if they really do find this levitation device? Then what? The mystery is much better to sell than what would happen if something unusual, a device, would be found, you'll say. This is their problem, and it is a genuine concern, of course. However, to the question, yes, we have mentioned this previously, and we reaffirm the same direction.
I have reached a dead end with trying to convince them to look for it. Briefly, what would be the most convincing? Be most convincing for me to say to them, to get them to look for the box to be searched for and found?
You're missing the point. If they find it, they would turn it over to the government, or the government would confiscate it, or there would be the possibility of shattering the myth that nothing really occurred or was found or was useless, or that this was an implant, that this was a scheme to get more publicity. They are concerned about these areas, and as such they are reluctant. It is like any church that has an icon or an artifact. They are reluctant to have it examined for the controversy it will naturally generate. This is their concern. Understand, however, in time, all things have their time and their place. This will surface again. There will be a rattling, there will be a crack in the wall, there will be a discovery of this. Fear not. Direction.
Okay. Properly used, briefly, would the box by itself be capable of nullifying gravity?
It disrupts the same. Understand it affects the principles of magnetism, gravity, and electricity, combined as one force. For it will define what gravity actually is. Rather a pull, it is a push. And if you can disrupt a push significantly, objects will float. The more you disrupt above the object, the more it floats, or the higher it goes. When you remove the force, or the disruptive force rather, the objects sink back to the ground, or to the place it would rest on. See it as a disrupting rather than an anti-force to gravity. It simply stopped the pushing down upon the object and it float. We say this in the general terms of what is taking place, but understanding, as you have directed, to speak briefly. To the effect, yes, there will be the finding of this again, and the influence will be to have things float off the ground, through the air, or through the water itself. And disrupting things in such a way, movement in controlled directions would occur. Direction.
Okay. Please locate Edward Leedskalnin. He died December 7, 1951, in Miami, Florida, USA. Edward Leedskalnin. This man built Coral Castle.
Yes, we have the entity. We have the mind.
Sure. In examining Edward Leedskalnin's life, briefly, how did he learn how to construct the box?
It was given to him in a dream. Understand the balance point had to be top dead center, and he was shown the various influences, the materials that were used. If you would examine the pyramids in Cancun, you would find similar construction, and other places in the world, of course. But where there are pyramids built in the same configuration, the same material, above and below, then you would find the entity was able to construct this through dreams or visions first, and then through his intellect. It occurred to him, you'll say. And of course he was in a state of mind in which he wanted to do something. He chose to keep the invention to himself. As others have created inventions in the past, usually they are immediately seized by military minds and used for destructive purposes. In the past, other inventors have suppressed their notions or ideas out of morality and fear that they would be used for destruction. The submarine, for instance. As you would find here, the same thinking. The entity kept it to himself. However, like the mysteries of the pyramids, this is not really a mystery. It is the use of nature in such a way as has been used countless times in the past. But here he decided to keep it to himself. To the question, however, firstly through the vision or dream, as most inventions usually occur, then through reason and contemplation, then through trial and error, and then the entity took the risk, for he felt that perhaps he would float off the earth himself. Direction.
There are photos of Ed Leedskalnin with a large tripod and a box affixed to the top of the tripod. Is this the same box you have indicated here?
Could be. Appears to be similar. Look at the tripod and you'll see a pyramid shape. What is underneath the tripod as well? Look for clues this way, but to the answer, this is in the proper top dead center position. Direction.
So briefly, why do you need to mount the box at the top of the tripod? The pyramid shape again?
To disrupt whatever is underneath it. Correction. To disrupt the forces above it so that whatever is underneath it will float.
Okay.
Direction.
Right. There is a contraption in Coral Castle that was apparently part of his tools. It is a round device that looks like a flywheel and has 24 protrusions or spokes. It's often called the magnetic flywheel. Please locate this. It's in Coral Castle.
We have the same.
Briefly, how did Edward Leach Skelton use this? What was it for?
This would somewhat be a disruptive and directional influence. It would be such that it would be as early part of his experimentation. For here in this regard, it disrupt both magnetism and gravity. And as it would spin, it would cause electricity to be disrupted as well. You might call it a pivotal, directional, almost like a balancing, spinning wheel, you'll see. Direction.
Thank you. Edward Leach Skelton was said by some to depend on the Earth's ley lines or energy grid in order to construct the castle where he did. If the box was found, or a reproduction made, and one were to use it, would it need to be used where ley lines intersect, or would it be effective anywhere on the Earth's surface?
It would be effective just about anywhere, but understand there are certain grid points. They change as the magnetic poles change, but to the question, look to those historical points that are equidistant from each other, temples or castles, and you would find that they make a channel. And as it would be those devices, those things that would float in the air, they would come in, landing, shall we call it, in a direct line because of these grids or channels, you'll say. To the question, it would work, but not so well, in other places, where there would be a crossing or a point equidistant from other points. Then you could build a highway or channel, a trade route, you might say. Like that, it would be now corresponding routes between places like railroad tracks going from one city to another in a straight line, or even that there would be aircraft flying from one position to a reporting point or VOR to another, IFR point, you say. These markers represent courses or directions, and as such, this would be the same using the Earth's magnetic and gravitational and electrical influences. For lightning strikes the Earth continuously, and as there is this continued striking, there is a certain vibration that exists throughout the atmosphere, about 8 hertz. And here, this is some hint at understanding influences that are around the planet already, but are not being used. Look to that of the visualization of the Aurora Borealis, and you would find that this is indicating of these forces that are here evident around the world, but in some places they are more concentrated. This is what you refer to as intersecting ley line points, you'll say. See them as grids or maps or roadways or marker points. This is what he was referring to.
Okay.
Direction.
Now, you mentioned the box is an example of technology that can nullify gravity. Briefly, where else in the world could one find a similar device?
You would find them in Egypt or Persia. You would find it in the temples in ancient times, in Spain or ancient Roman locations. The Egyptians in their temples, these would be coordinating places, you'll say. Direction.
Okay, so could an example of the box or the technology that replicates it, does it exist today anywhere in the world?
We will answer affirmative to that, because this would be one device that he invented, put together, or manufactured. And there were others who did the same. And there are other machines that would run with this, let us call it invisible energy or power source. They understood how to coordinate gravity, electricity, and magnetism, and they understood how to disrupt it. It is a simple, obvious method, so simple that it is overlooked. Understanding gravity is still incomplete. However, in understanding the workings of this, gravity would be understood. It pushes everything apart, rather than pulling everything apart, you'll say. However, it looks like the same. When one is falling, they don't think they're being pushed from above, they think they're being drawn down from below. It takes a new appreciation, but to this, it would have effects, and it will come about as there will be the understanding of how magnetism can work through opposing faces in machinery, and this already has been invented. Horsepower can be exchanged across two magnetic faces or surfaces. Seemingly impossible, but already it is invented. As such, slowly the pieces will come together. It will take that as to a coordinating effect to understand how to disrupt the gravitational electricity, and then how to swirl the magnetic force to control it, then to disrupt or bridge or dome shape the point that allows things to float. But here in the past it has been well understood. In antiquity there were no highways, there were simply routes through the air. See? Stone passageways, stone highways would be markers. They would guide floating devices that would be like large platforms. These would be rumored to be flying carpets, but here they were simply barges that moved across distances. The problem was stopping them once they got going. Direction.
Some observations on the previous reading. Upon examination once again of the box, it was indicated there is something folded on top of the box that looks like a ribbon, but it is not. Could this actually be the wires for the electrical input of the box? The previous reading also talks about gravity as a push, not a pulling force. This has been discussed centuries ago in Lesage's theory of gravitation and remains somewhat debated to this day. It's not a new concept, but it is generally disregarded among scientists and physicists. But what is indicated in this DTM is that the box disrupted the force of gravity above it, enabling what was beneath the box to float. Some people have questioned whether Ed moved Coral Castle to be closer to an active grid point or ley line, so I asked about that also. The DTM indicates here it would not be necessary to activate the device on one of these geographical points, only that resonant frequencies that Ed was apparently using would be stronger or more effective in certain places than others, but that the box device would be effective anywhere on the Earth's surface. As for the reasons the staff are not enthusiastic about looking for the box, the concerns mentioned in the previous reading are legitimate. If such a device were found, it could be accused of just being a sham or a publicity stunt. If the device were legitimate and its secrets rediscovered, then this levitation technology could once again be brought into the world. If that were to happen, Coral Castle's secret would be out, and the owners might fear a loss of revenue because then anyone could effortlessly lift heavy blocks of stone like Ed did, like the ancient Egyptians did, and those before them. It would arguably make Coral Castle less special, and therefore be bad for business. Picture yourself as the owner or caretaker of the property. Understand there are potential drawbacks whether they look for the box or don't. I had spoken to a company that does ground-penetrating radar examinations in the area, and mentioned to the Coral Castle staff that I'd be willing to pick up the tab personally for it, but they were not interested. In this next DTM, I ask about reproducing the box. After all, if it ends up staying where it is, how about making a working replica instead? In previous communications, I asked about Coral Castle and its builder, Edward Lee Scalman, and the gravity distortion device he hid within the wall of Coral Castle. You mentioned the Coral Castle owners are concerned about the repercussions of finding this box, but they have little interest in discovering it. Briefly, would this source give the information to make a working replica of the device, if I asked?
This would require knowledges beyond the self, and this would be not exactly in accordance with what the self would profess as to the future. To the question, we would give the parameters, but it would require activities of the self. Certain frequencies would be discovered, certain usages of what would be the combination of the forces, electrical, magnetical, and gravitational. This would be a little beyond the scope of self. However, we could not give that would be detailed. This would belong to the minds of that would bring it back into the world, you see. Direction.
Okay, briefly, when could one expect the rediscovery of this?
To some degree, there is evidence of this even now. Certain patents would find that there have been films of metal floating in the air and the movement of objects, but they have been disturbed by the gravitational fluctuation, we'll say. However, you would expect this to be in the very near future. However, there is some remnants or some evidence of this being already affected by those who have not invented, but have experimented with this source, we'll say, as to that of the gravitational, anti-gravitational flotation, we'll say. Understand, the key here is to create a sandwich, so to speak, to disrupt the electrical, magnetical forces beneath the object, and to have that it would be a disruptive force above the object. It would cause vortexes or low pressure zones similar to that used on an air wing to push the object up rather than to float it. However, it would need to be perfectly balanced. Direction.
At this point, in early October 2014, I had written the property owners a letter asking them to reconsider looking for the device. This is the last DTM session in which I asked about Coral Castle and is, as of the time of this writing, where things currently stand. Firstly, please locate
We have the entity.
They are the property owners of Coral Castle in Florida. I sent them a letter recently asking them to reconsider searching for the gravity disruptor device hidden within Coral Castle's wall. Very briefly, did they receive and read my letter?
It would appear that the letter is opened and on a desk. The answer would be to the affirmative.
Okay. I offered them compensation for searching for the box. I tried to appeal to their business side as businessmen, the desire for money, and also more of an altruistic, bringing technology into the world, that this could benefit the world from that aspect as well. Carefully worded the letter. Very briefly, what was their reaction?
They are uncertain as to your intentions, and also uncertain if they should release such information to the greater public mind, you'll say. Direction.
Okay, thank you. So very briefly, is there any way they would reconsider or no?
It would appear that they are, with the letter on the desk, keeping an open mind and, you might say, considering the request. No conclusion at this point. The probability is low that they will accept, not because of your intentions, but because of what is going on in the world today. Should such information be found, what would be the repercussions? Naturally, there would be the use of this for warfare, would there not? This might be a devastating weapon. And therefore, like all who have invented such things, like the submarine and the helicopter, they have contemplated what would happen in the early development or inventions of such devices. And as you know, such devices were used initially for destructive purposes. Even the atomic bomb, with all its merit and ability to create unlimited power for the entire world, its use was not for constructive, but rather massive destructive purposes. This device, as now seen regularly, as to the principles of nature being used to develop power efficiently, effectively, cleanly, although there are some issues. Now, in this generation, this same understanding of nature is being used for constructive purposes, but it took 5 generations. As such, saving lives with isotopes, or here incinerating people on the spot, such control of nature, as humans, as you know, humans usually do, it is for the destructive purpose first. This might be, to the satisfaction of the question, the only concern they would have. However, no man can say this or that must take place. To yourself, they understand your intentions. It is the consequences that they are concerned about. Direction.
As of this writing, it has now been about 3 months later, and I have not heard back. The debate continues to this day. Was anti-gravity employed in the construction of Coral Castle? Would Ed have worked by himself and almost exclusively at night if all he had was knowledge of weight, leverage, and center of gravity? Ed's extreme secrecy in building Coral Castle would make much more sense in the context of having something to hide, and yes, a device capable of levitation, if fallen into the wrong hands, could be misused. Many have speculated the oblong black box was not only a pivotal piece of the puzzle, but that it was a frequency generator of some sort. Note the DTM's mention of the Schumann resonance. Ed also wrote extensively about magnetic current, so obviously electromagnetism was already a part of his psyche or his knowledge. It's not much of a leap to figure it was probably part of Coral Castle's construction as well. If the information given in this presentation is accurate, and the aforementioned device successfully extracted from the wall, placed into capable hands, examined and back-engineered, it could finally solve the riddle. Based on an impressive track record of the DTM's finding clients' lost items and other feats of remote viewing, I'm quietly confident what is given here in this presentation is true. However, the possibility that the information is inaccurate must also, of course, be conceded. It is absolutely not the intention of this video to unrealistically raise hopes, nor encourage anyone to search for the device on their own. Rather, it is only to raise awareness and stimulate debate. Please abide by the following. Do not criticize or harass the Coral Castle ambassadors or staff or property owners. If visiting Coral Castle, respect the property. Do not commit any illegal acts, any acts of vandalism or defacing of the property, and abide by the site's rules at all times. I appreciate your feedback. If you have been researching Coral Castle and found this information useful, or if you have any thoughts on how best to proceed from here, leave a comment below.